One of the original images that sent me off on this archaeologist looking for paranormal kinds of things was a shot that was repeated several times in several different Republic serials of a guy on a horse jumping onto a truck.
There was one scene with a tank. George wanted an old World War I. George just said, look, I just want an old World War I tank in this movie. I don't know what to do with it, but we have to have a tank in the picture. So I basically wrote the scene in storyboards. I wrote the entire horse and tank that Indy jumps on.
And then this is just after the tank explodes. Then a little further on, we did this. Okay, this is where we make a hard turn left to right. Left to right.
In fact, Vic Armstrong did the jump. Sometimes the stuntmen themselves make suggestions.
Terry Leonard saw my storyboards and he said, I wonder if I can talk you into doing something. He said, there's a stunt that I tried to do that I was actually copying Yakima Canutt, the famous stunt in Stagecoach where he went under all the horses and the covered wagon. And Terry Leonard really got hurt.
The swing team got a little out of line and pulled me over under the wheelers, and one of the wheelers stepped on me, broke my handhold loose.
He had broken bones, he had contusions, he had abrasions, he was a mess. And Terry said, this has been eating away at me for years. Is there any way you can add a stunt where I go under the truck and come back out the other side? So that whole stunt was Terry Leonard's idea. And I said, my God, I wish I had thought of it. That's an amazing idea. So we put that in the movie, and Terry, I think for his own edification and self-confidence, recreated that stunt under a truck this time, which could have been even more dangerous had something gone wrong. Then I had Vic Armstrong, who did most of Harrison's doubling because he looked so much like Harrison. The audience wouldn't know.
Harrison is fantastic to work with. He's very tough. The biggest problem is he wants to do everything himself. You've got to keep holding him back because he's talented enough and physically fit enough to do it all, but he is the star of millions of dollars worth of movie and you can't risk anything happening to him.
No, just another day at the office.
I think every sort of element that one wants to get into a movie was captured in that movie, which made it tough. Consequently, years later, when you're trying to set up movies and arrange and coordinate sequences or event sequences in movies, people go, no, I can't do that, they did it in Raiders. It used to drive us mad. Everything was sort of thrown into it.
Ironically, Steven Spielberg, who can create heart-stopping sensations in the cinema, has a personal aversion to such experiences. He won't go near a thrill ride in a theme park, even one he's designed himself. Perhaps Indy's adventures are a release of his worst nightmares.
I have a terrible fear of heights. And when the bridge was finished, I could go out 40 yards from either end, but I couldn't go to the point of no return. Just couldn't do it. Harrison, in the meantime, said, oh, that's nothing, and he ran across the bridge. First time he got on the bridge, he ran as fast as he could from one end to the other. Couldn't believe he did that, but that's Harrison Ford. Yes, he's Indiana Jones.
Hello, lady, we're going for a ride.
Oh, my God!
Even in the best produced movies, some things are occasionally overlooked. Like finding yourself in Sri Lanka, the former Ceylon, and remembering you need flailing bodies who have to fall off a bridge.
There was always this discussion who was going to make the dummies, and we were told there was somebody in America who specializes in dummies, and then I never heard anything, and we were ready to go to Sri Lanka in about 6 weeks' time. So I finally said to Frank Marshall, I said, Frank, what's happening about the dummies, you know? He said, you make them, why don't you make them? You know, just like that, you know. So there we had to work out a way to mass produce 14 mechanical dummies, you see.
Okay, anytime, George.
So we just went and bought mannequins, and we used them to make molds. And then we just put crew mechanics in, and they just worked off ordinary flat batteries.
George, that was great.
And then we had a switch, and we tied a string from that to the bridge, and then we set all the dummies up so that when they fell away, they pulled the wedges away from the switches, and then the dummies just start flinging their arms and legs in the air.
That's the magic of the movies. The master shot is done in a remote abyss in Sri Lanka. But 5,000 miles away, on the Elstree backlot in London, the stuntmen do the mid-shots, and the stars do their close-ups. The alligators were filmed in Florida. There are many more inside stories about making the 6 hours of Indy's adventures, but at the end of each shoot, one traditional element of magic polish was added by composer John Williams. He'd already composed Star Wars for Lucas and Jaws for Spielberg.
John saw the movie and loved it and went off to write the music, and he called me one day and previewed all the themes on the piano. You know, he'd actually written 2 Raiders themes. He had written, play that for me, which I freaked out over. I loved it so much. Then he said, and here's another possible Raiders score, Raiders main theme, and he played. And so he had 2 choices, and I think my only input was to say, can't you use both?
And the romantic theme had a romantic ending.
I look back on Temple of Doom and I say, well, the greatest thing that I got out of that movie was I met Kate Capshaw, and we were married years later, and we have 7 children. You know, we have 2 adopted kids, we have 3 between us, and we have 2 other kids from previous marriages, and that to me was the reason I think it was fated that I make Temple of Doom.
A quarter of a century after starting the first Indiana story, the team has plans to make a 4th episode for release in 2005. But will Steven Spielberg now use the computer techniques to create his sets and stunts?
Well, I like movies that are all about craft and collaboration. You know, films that kind of rely on the best of all departments. You know, the best plasterers, you know, the best electricians, the best painters, you know, the best special effects. That's good old-fashioned movie making, and I hope I can keep making, if I make a 4th Indiana Jones film, which we're doing right now, that we can do most of it in the camera as much as possible. Some stuff will have to be done in the computer, of course, because it's just better. But most of it, I think, I'll keep in the camera and keep the sets being built in real time and on a real soundstage.